Good morning. We're going to give it a few minutes here just to let everyone get in from the waiting room, and we'll start in just a second. All right, I'm going to give it just another few seconds, let folks get in from the waiting room, and then we'll get started. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Kelsey Erickson-Stroikert. I'm the Chief Public Affairs Officer for the Texas Restaurant Association. Thank you for joining us today for a really important conversation about what's happening in the Texas restaurant industry and why it's absolutely critical that our lawmakers in DC replenish what's known as the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, or the RRF. For press joining us, I will drop in the chat a list of our speakers today with their names and titles. If you could please stay on mute, and then once everyone has spoken, we'll open it up for press inquiries. At that point, please just come off mute or raise your hand and we'll go one by one. Please start any question directing it to someone if you'd like, and then also sharing your name and the organization you're affiliated with. So with that, we're going to kick things off today with my friend and boss, Dr. Emily Williams-Knight.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We're nearly 2 years into this pandemic, and COVID-19 continues to wreak havoc on almost every restaurant, every single restaurant in Texas, in fact. Restaurants continue to go above and beyond to keep their customers and their employees safe, following CDC best practices through our Texas Restaurant Promise. Thanks to this focus and discipline throughout the entire pandemic, we are earning consumers' trust and maintaining pretty strong demand, especially compared to so many other states. But that's only one piece of the puzzle to COVID-19. The data tells us that almost every restaurant in Texas is also struggling to survive in the toughest market they've ever seen due to labor shortages, supply chain disruptions, and of course, increasing food costs. In December of 2021, even before the Omicron variant hit Texas, 78% of our restaurants reported that they did not have enough employees to support existing customer demand. 83% said their total labor costs as a percentage of sales were higher than they were prior to the COVID-19 outbreak. 93% said their total food costs as a percentage of sales were higher than they were prior to the COVID-19 outbreak. An astonishing 96% of operators reported that they had experienced supply chain delays and shortages of key products and beverages over the last 90 days. Not only are prices up across the board, but in many instances, they're double or triple what restaurants are used to paying for key items like beef, poultry, flour, and packaging supplies. Just as one example, I hear regularly from operators across our state who are trying to grow their to-go business, only to find that they can't get straws, lids, or even to-go containers. This is what it's like for restaurants operating in the COVID-19 era. They pivot, they adopt new options, for example, but then they have a new challenge to face and try to overcome. The latest variant took a tough situation and made it 10 times worse, especially because of timing. The Omicron hit Texas during the most important season for restaurants, the holiday season. And unfortunately, 81% of Texas operators just reported a decline in customer demand for indoor on-premise during the weeks that have just preceded us. And that is actually due to the increase in COVID-19 cases. Unfortunately, looking at the data today for the first few weeks of January, things have not improved. They've actually gotten worse for restaurants here in Texas. I've heard restaurant operators refer to COVID-19 as a roller coaster that we can't get off. Things were looking up last fall, but as we stand here today, I'm extremely worried about how many Texas restaurants, especially these small independent restaurants, can survive year 3 of this roller coaster without help. The good news is we have a very simple solution that we know works. The Restaurant Revitalization Fund, or the RRF as we call it, is a grant program that Congress established to help small and independent restaurants in particular. It targets relief to small businesses who, through no fault of their own, have been significantly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, helping them replace lost revenue, keep employees on the payroll, and repay debts accumulated just to keep their doors open and keep their business alive during the peak of the pandemic. When Congress created the RRF and provided enough resources to fund about 1/3 of the eligible applicants, we saw tremendous results that are still paying dividends about 6 months later. 96% of RRF recipients here in Texas said the grant made it more likely that they would be able to stay in business during the pandemic. 88% of the recipients in Texas said the grant helped them retain or hire back employees that would otherwise have been temporarily or permanently laid off. And the National Restaurant Association, our partners, estimate that RRF has already saved more than 900,000 restaurant jobs across the US, including 62,000 right here in Texas. Our legislators in Congress have a very simple choice in front of them: finish the job they started and replenish RRF so every deserving small business has a chance to survive this pandemic and to keep their members on payroll. We estimate this would save 1.6 million restaurant jobs across the country. Or they can leave over 177 small restaurants in the dark, accepting that thousands will be forced to close their doors, even though they have endured 2 years of struggle and sacrifice. In my mind, there really is not a choice at all. I also want to be clear that there is money available to do this right now and to do the right thing. Legislators on both sides of the political aisle have ideas for how we can repurpose unused COVID-19 relief dollars or appropriate new funding. Either way, we're talking about a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of money that DC has spent lately and what's at stake for thousands of small business owners, their employees, and the communities they serve. We can't wait any longer. We need every member of our federal delegation to immediately support replenishing RRF so we can help save the local businesses that make our communities a home. This is bigger than economics and jobs, although those are incredibly important. This really is about community and whether or not we're going to take care of our neighbors when they need and deserve the help the most, because remember, they have always taken care of us. This is about preserving those places that create our heritage and make Texas an incredibly special place to live. Thank you for being here today and for helping us tell the stories of our amazing restaurants who help step up for our community day in and day out. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Next, we're going to hear from two of our restaurant operators who are impacted by this directly. We have about 12,000 small and local restaurants here in the state of Texas that applied for this funding, were eligible for it, but weren't able to receive a grant simply because the program was underfunded. So these are just two of those stories that really impact every community and segment across Texas. So first, I'd like to ask Chris Berry to speak. He is the operating partner of Riversmith Chicken and Catfish from the great city of Lubbock. Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Kelsey and Emily, thanks for inviting me to join today. So Lubbock has been home for the last 10 years or so, but I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas, and baptized almost immediately into the restaurant industry. My maternal grandparents had restaurants, so we grew up as soon as we were tall enough to stand on a pickle bucket and wash dishes or climb up on a booth and clean tables. That was how we contributed to the family. Ever since, I've just been enamored by the industry and couldn't get away from it, even if I tried. For the love of the industry, just seeing the folks back when I was growing up, when I was young, seeing the folks coming in just enamored with visiting with my grandmother and my parents and my aunts and uncles, sharing their life stories, just going in for that experience to share a meal, but to share their life stories. I just love it ever since. It's just a part of me that I can't get rid of. The last 24 months, however, have been quite different. The last 24 months have probably aged us 10 years, just with the daily hustle and bustle, added on with the labor shortages, with the supply chain shortages and challenges. Just as Emily mentioned, the smallest things you can't get a hold of, the straws, the styrofoam cups, just to be able to plate your meal and get it to your employees and to your customers has growing challenge every single day. I think what's kept us going is tenacity. Most of us in this position, restaurant owners, have started as dishwashers and bussers, just like I did, and crawled and crawled and just scraped their way to the top. So I think a lot of us have that tenacity to where we've experienced a lot of different things along the way. So we're not going to let this beat us. We're going to do our best to provide for those staff that rely on us day in and day out. We have 50 or so families of employees that rely on us for their wages to provide for their families. So I think that's what keeps us going every day, fighting the good fight, continue with that tenacity, and just continuing on forward. For our experience for the RRF, we have two different entities that we applied for and were both approved for. So we have the main entity that operates the restaurant that was approved for a sizable amount, as well as another entity we have for a food truck that was approved for a small amount. Both were approved. We were excited and elated, of course, to hear the news that we were approved for both. And then once we heard that funds quickly ran out, just your shoulders drop again. It's almost a daily occurrence. Like what's going to be the challenge or letdown today? And it hasn't beaten us, and it won't beat us. But we're so looking forward to having that shot in the arm for both entities. We had plans for tremendous plans for both, and of course those are on hold. So I think we continue to fight. But the last 24 months, or last 22 months, almost all of those months are you fight and you look at the P&L at the end of the month, and it's like, well, did we at least get to break even? That's almost the goal, much less profitability. But it's just, can we keep going, and how long can we keep doing this is really the question.
Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate those words. Next up, we're going to hear from Tracy Vaught. Tracy is the owner of H-Town Restaurant Group out of Houston, tremendous partner of ours, and has a really unique experience to share on this topic. So Tracy, take it away.
Hi, I'm happy to be here and be able to talk to you a little bit about our situation. First, I want to say restaurant owners are not okay. I think it's important for everybody to understand that most restaurants are barely hanging in there. We have 4 restaurants that have been open quite a long time, and then we have one newer restaurant that opened during the pandemic. The lease was signed prior to the pandemic, so we didn't know what was ahead of us. Our restaurants are generally considered fine dining. They're not fancy, but we have waiters, and it's a nicer restaurants. And they've been particularly hit because of business lunches. Nobody's in their offices, and in Houston right now, there's a 30% vacancy in offices, lease offices. And then of the 70% that are leased, only about 30% of the people are actually going to work. So if my math is correct, that means about 21% of office workers are actually in the office. So for fine dining lunches, you need office workers. places that do big to-go business are, I think, capturing some business, but we actually haven't opened our restaurants for lunch, weekday lunches, in almost 2 years. That just seems unreal to me. We're closed on Mondays, and we're closed on Sunday nights, and we're closed weekday lunches. We really need those shifts in order to be profitable. So we've been holding, hanging in there, but the pandemic has brought us all to our knees. We're, if I hear the word pivot one more time, I'm going to spit nails on somebody. We've had to make so many adaptations to accommodate and stay in business, that every day there's a new challenge. It's like, just bring it on. If I could handle all these other things, I can certainly handle whatever is coming my way. But I wanted to talk a little bit about our business and what it means basically to our community. It used to be a long time ago, you'd go celebrate in a restaurant maybe once a month or maybe every 2 weeks, and it might be somebody's birthday or something good happened. But now people depend on restaurants for a lot of things on a daily basis. So we're really a community center, as well as providing meals for people. Many people don't know how to cook anymore. So we're providing really a community service in a way. And it's just, I've learned that after we'd have disasters like hurricanes down here, and realized that there were people at the door who were hungry. I mean, they really didn't know how to prepare themselves for a hurricane, couldn't cook at home and that kind of thing. So restaurants are really a part of the fabric of our daily lives now. Anyway, it's been very challenging, obviously, and without being able to be open full schedule, and with employees being scarce, we can't hire people. And then of course the wages have gone way up, and the cost of goods has gone up, and many of the products are scarce, especially if they're coming from other countries. Champagne and tequila, oh my God, so hard to get those two things, and we need them. So, I feel like I want to say also that people say, okay, raise your prices, everybody will raise their prices and people will get used to it, and, they'll pay it. But what they're not thinking about is that people have an alternative. They don't have to go out to eat. They can cook at home. They can buy things at the grocery store, prepared food at the grocery store. So we're having these price pressures from both sides, the price of goods and people and everything going up, but then customers, their natural tendencies pushing prices down at the same time, and we're kind of caught in the middle. Anyway, all those things have happened as a result of the pandemic, and it's been going on for so long that, we need relief. 2 years is too long for any kind of, for us to handle it, I guess I could say. And as far as our group, it's sort of there's the business challenges, but there's also the people challenges. And our business is much about managing people as it is about making food and drink and serving it. We are very employee heavy in the restaurant business. So, a restaurant that is, a popular fine dining restaurant with a fairly large footprint might have over 100 employees. So, that's really something to manage. And the human toll that this has taken has been a bit overwhelming. I mean, we are losing employees to the disease. Employees are losing family members. And then they turn around and have to come back and put themselves in the same position that their mother, father, grandmother died from. So, they have the same genetics and they're putting themselves at risk because that's the job they know. We're not able to go to our vacation home in Colorado and, Zoom it in. We can't work from home. We're side by side with people every day. So the business is one thing, but the human toll is another. And I think it has maybe forced us all to look at that part of it more closely and to make adjustments for people who need time off, or for people who have loss, or those kinds of things. So it's just been something. It truly, you asked me to tell my story, and that's sort of I'm bouncing around all over the place, but I have a lot of emotion about it. And it's anyway.
No, I appreciate that, Tracy. I think it is so important to remember that these are people dealing with all of life's challenges and stressors, and also carrying the weight of their employees, their communities, their families on their shoulders. And we feel that emotional toll and pressure every day. So I'm glad you shared that. Go ahead, Tracy.
That as far as bringing it back to what we're actually here for, the RRF grant, at one of our restaurants, we submitted everything right at the moment it opened, and we felt fairly confident we'd done it correctly, and they had questions, and they were treating it a little differently than they did the other restaurants. Couldn't quite figure out why, and then we timed out, basically, because of the lawsuit that was filed. So, that's the reason I'm here.
Yeah, so just to clarify, some of Tracy's restaurants were able to get a grant, one was not. And Tracy, can you just expand a little bit on what it meant and what that grant allowed you to do for those restaurants that were lucky enough to receive help?
The best example that I can give you is I have a restaurant downtown that's in a convention district, and it is in a hotel, and it's near ballparks and a place where they make concerts. And so all that stuff was shut down. The hotel had no guests, and there were no conventions, there were no ball games, there were no concerts. So the restaurant down there was like in an island, nobody around. So we couldn't reopen it. So it took us 8 months to finally reopen this restaurant. It sat fallow for 8 months. And then when we finally did, we could only open it a few shifts a week for all the reasons that we've just been talking about. And it's still not open for lunch. Well, that restaurant got our RF funds. And so we have opened up, and we are serving dinner Tuesday through Saturday, and then we have Sunday brunch. So we've been able to expand to that point. We tried lunches during the holidays, and then when January came, we had Omicron, we had to close it back down again. But those funds did help us hire everybody back and get started. So, it definitely helped. And, each restaurant has its own unique patterns and customer base and challenges. And so we have one other in the Galleria, which is a large office area and shopping district. And, the same thing there. We were able to expand our hours somewhat in order to, accommodate more, employees and more customers. And then when Omicron hit, we had to shut it back down. So those funds did help us get open. And get going, kind of pay our bills and you know, make our landlords be at rest, not worried. But you know, we're in a position now where we, you know, would very much like that restaurant to be able to participate in that grant. So
Kelsey, I'll just add real quick, something that you both alluded to, I think is important, and it maybe ties a little bit to the question in the chat box. When we first really actively pushed for this with our restaurant association partners across the nation, we had asked for a considerably more because we knew the need. We could look at the losses across the US, and here in Texas, we knew the significance. And we actually pushed very hard and received not even a third of the ask. And so what happened is, in Chris's experience, is that we had operators that would, on day one, they applied, they had everything in order, they received a notification, they were approved. Many of them, you know, for things like paying their rent or their mortgage, bringing employees back to be able to actually increase capacity. And there was tremendous hope. And in just a few weeks, it was gone. And what happened is all those folks that were approved, once the dollars were gone, they just didn't get funded. And so really the ask here is not to create a new program, not to bring in new monies. This is really about awarding all of those folks that went through the process, that were eligible based on their losses, to actually give them this grant money that not only they expected, but they deserve. And I think that's very important delineation. This is not the restaurants coming back again, or this is really about finishing the job that they already started and made a commitment to one of the most important industries in the entire country. And that's why we know it works. We can see the dollars work. And one of the really important stat that I was talking with one of the economic groups here in Texas, and for every dollar that a restaurant generates in sales, it actually is $2 of economic impact in that community. And I think that's really important, is that it's not only investment, as Kelsey said, for, you know, that restaurant to be in that community and hiring people, but it's also the economic impact those restaurants make and those sales that happen in that restaurant. So if they can't get back to full capacity, if they can't operate, if they're closing, like Tracy has indicated, they're not back to generating the same levels of revenue that we did in 2019. And here we were close to $80 billion. And so it's not a small task and it's not a small industry, but the impact is far more significant than just to that individual restaurant.
Absolutely. Thank you, Emily. I'm about to open it up to press questions. So everyone get ready and just let me know if you have a question. I also want to share that every Texan can help in this effort. We're asked all the time by members of our industry, but also just by citizens who love their restaurants and depend on their restaurants. To Tracy's point, how can I help? This is the easiest, best way. It takes 1 minute. You can use the link that I'm going to share in the chat right now, and it allows you to email your members of Congress and our US senators in Texas, urging them to support an immediate replenishment of the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So with that, let me change my view here so I can see everyone. And then we're going to dive into questions. Sarah Blaskovich, I know you had one. If you want to unmute yourself, and everyone asking questions, please start with your name and who you represent, and then jump into your question. Sarah, we can't hear you, so maybe make sure you're not still on mute. Oh, I see Sarah, so that's a step. There we go.
Hi guys, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Sorry about that. There's not a place for me to unmute myself that I could find. So I don't know if other people are going to have that same problem or if it's just a me problem. Emily, I have 3 questions. I think they're for you. The first, am I understanding that you don't want new people to apply?
No, actually, I think we want every restaurant that has had the impact of COVID-19 and continued and has demonstrated losses to benefit. Right now, our main focus is to replenish what we know we need based on those applications. But that does not mean that as this continues and moves into year 3, that we will not be back at Congress saying, look at the devastation and look at the losses and see how we can actually help. Right now, we know there's about 12,000 restaurants just in our state that applied and were likely eligible that got nothing. And we want to fix that today. And we think we can get enough momentum because of the success and the numbers that we've seen in the first round to be able to get Congress to come together to get those restaurants what they need and deserve to continue operating.
Okay, good. That was another question. How many people didn't get funding? You think 12,000 restaurants applied, were eligible and didn't get money, right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
That's
A
in
last
Texas.
question. How much-
That's just in Texas, Sarah. That's not
Okay, yeah.
nationally. That's just here, which is incredible. That's almost 10% of our number of restaurants and eating establishments we have in the state.
Okay, and then last question. Thanks for doing this with me. How much money do you want?
50 billion. We need 50 billion. Kelsey's going to give me the check to make sure I've got my math right. We need 50 billion. And if we do the math and score it appropriately, we've spent more than 5 trillion, maybe 7 trillion as a nation. So to us, you know, we're to have quibbling over $50 billion, which is really what this need is right now, seems quite foolish in the long game of trying to save the industry.
And that's 50 billion for Texas restaurants.
No, that's 50 billion across the country.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Rose, we're going to go to you next. If my team can unmute Rose. Thanks for bearing with us, y'all. Technology. One of these days we'll understand Zoom.
Rose, you have the ability to unmute yourself. You just need to click the unmute button on your side as well. We'll give you all permission just before you raise your hands, and then you do have to unmute yourselves on your end too.
Maybe go to Clifford.
Clifford, if you can unmute yourself, we'll jump to you.
Yeah, it showed up. Hi, how you doing?
Hi.
I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared. I was typing something in. What I'm concerned about, I own multiple restaurants, and they're not elaborate, you know, $2 or $3 million restaurants a year. I'm a small type mom and pop restaurant as a franchisee. What I'm concerned is all this money that was used and raked by these people that were fraudulently entering information and getting millions of dollars for this. And now that money was taken away from us mom and pop type restaurants and other restaurants that are involved trying to get money that need money. What is being done to prevent this or get back? And I heard it was like a lot, billions to that point. Especially one company got something like $1.2 billion for no company at all. He just put a number of different ones in there and he was caught. But there's a lot more out there. Am I wrong in saying this or what?
Kelsey, you want to take it or you want me to?
I'll start, and Emily, maybe you can add on. You know, it's important with any of these relief programs that we don't have waste, fraud, and abuse. The worst thing we can have is money going to people who don't deserve it when we have a lot of need and a lot of people who have done the right things to be eligible to receive it. We're not aware of significant problems with the RRF specifically. That's one of the reasons we're really prioritizing replenishing that fund instead of creating a new relief program or doing something like the PPP, where we did see some examples of the wrong folks getting the money. But bottom line is, when we invest in our small and independent restaurants, as you know well, Clifford, it sounds like, that money pays double, triple, quadruple dividends in the community, because it doesn't stay in that restaurant. It goes to the employees, it goes to the suppliers. They then use it to invest back in their communities. So we think this is more than a solid investment, and we always support the transparency and sort of auditing provisions that are necessary to make sure it's spent in the right way.
You know,
Emily?
Let me continue, please. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I think it's valid what you're saying. I used the money. What upset me is I went for the second flow of the money available, and I was short $1,000 to get it of increase. Because the money I did use, I raised my employees significantly high. Some were like 60% higher in wages. It's not 70. But I did also PR, promotion, discount, coupons to increase my sales because I did market my restaurant, which I've done all my life, and I was 1,000 short. It's like, why did I even do it? Because it cost me now, another $60,000, $70,000, $100,000 I could have got to continue treating my workers respectfully and running my operations without losing employees. And then I have the deal with the employees that come to work for you for 2-3 weeks, and they walk out. Well, I don't like this. I walk out. Then 2 days later, you get filed for unemployment, which I found now they can't do that. But it significantly hurts the people that are working, that want the jobs, when you have these people coming in and doing this job. But that's concern of the money, the variance of money we could have got, because we were trying to get our restaurants working good, getting good service, discounting our food already before all this prices of product went up, but yet we're penalized because we did the right thing. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for that, Clifford. I think it really just highlights the layers of challenges that all of these operators face. You think you've solved one problem, and then the next one comes right around the corner. So certainly appreciate that and appreciate your comments. I do want to get to some more folks before we run out of time. Tiffany, I know your hand's raised. If you could go ahead and unmute yourself and say who you are, where you're from, and ask your question, please. It says you're unmuted, Tiffany, but we can't hear you. All right, I'm going to go to Jose. Tiffany, maybe it's an audio issue on your end. We'll check back in with you. Jose from Texas Monthly.
Hi, this question or questions is for Tracy Vaught. Tracy, a lauded award-winning restaurant group like yours has an optical benefit over other operators. But as you said, Tochi was shuttered for 8 months, so you're not immune. How hopeful are you that the fund will get the monies it needs, and you will be able to get a portion of that?
Well, I have no crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen, but I really hope in my heart that they do replenish this fund and make it available for everyone. There are many of us who suffered pretty big losses in sales compared to 2019, which is how this is measured, I guess. I mean, almost every restaurant, maybe other than a drive-through type, has suffered big losses. And for somebody who's been in business a long time like me, I've been saving for a long time. So I'm in a better position maybe than someone who's just starting out. And, we're all losing money. It's just, a reality. And so it's important because the restaurant community is important. We serve a big purpose, I think, now. It's different than it used to be.
Well, what advice would you give restaurateurs or chefs who are opening restaurants right now?
I would give them advice to get involved and to make sure they have a seat at the table when decisions are being made that affect them and their businesses. I think many of us in the restaurant business think if we just work hard on our business, that's all we have to do. But nowadays, there'll be legislation coming down the pike that you don't even know about that could really hurt you. So my advice is to get involved with Restaurant Association or other groups, local, get involved in your local politics a little bit, or state, or in the case, if you're a member of the Restaurant Association, you're automatically connected to local, state, and national. I think that's really important, and it's just another aspect of being a business owner.
Thanks, Tracy. I think Tiffany might be with us now. I'm going to give her a chance.
And
All
Rose
right.
is back too.
Oh, Rose, go ahead and unmute yourself if you're ready. All right, then how about Alana, NBC5 Dallas?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, forgive me if this was already discussed. This question can be for Emily. Has there been any discussion or movement at the federal level toward actually replenishing this fund, or are they just dragging their feet on moving forward with some sort of solution for restaurants?
Yeah, we know this has to begin on the Senate side. And in order for us to get to where we need at least 10 Senate Republicans to sign on to this. We've been working very hard with our senators here in Texas. I think that we will have Senator Cornyn's support. Obviously, these things are always in relation to other types of spending. We know that February looks to be the month that they will get a spending package together. Similarly, we're working on the House side, and we've actually picked up a lot of support on the House side. But it's really the Senate and where this has to come from. And so, I think this is about both sides of the aisle working together and to understand that restaurants are not a partisan issue, that restaurants matter in every single one of their communities. And we are just imploring them to work together to do what's right for small businesses across the country. I'm going to ask Kelsey to jump in too, but I can tell you we spend an extraordinary amount of time right now on the federal side of this to make sure that this goes through. And events like this and having real operators talk about the reality on the ground. That's the messages. These are the voters. Like, we elected the people that are sitting in Washington, and just because we're in Texas and we've had a bit of a better reopening does not mean that these restaurants are where they need to be. And so Kelsey, I think, for us, it's that link. It's the link Kelsey shared. It's making every elected official understand that they have to do this. This isn't about negotiating for something. This is about what's right for an industry that literally is essential and kept America fed during the pandemic. And they just need one more of this boost, right, to get them through. It's frustrating, and I'll be careful because I tend to get frustrated on this, but we're even having this debate. It's just so obvious when you look at the math and the numbers that we need to do this. It's what's right. And so I think there is an opportunity, but if people don't work together in Washington, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I'll just add that the reason we think now is the time to really be sharing this message is twofold. One, restaurants are desperate for the help. Omicron really set us back, really exacerbated longstanding challenges that now threaten the very survival of thousands of small and independent restaurants that we thought were going to be able to make it through, and now we're not sure. The second piece of that is federal funding expires February 18th. So we know Congress is going to have to work in some kind of bipartisan fashion to address spending. That gives us an opportunity to potentially tack this on and finally replenish the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So those are the two reasons that you really hear us making this push that it has to be now. There's bipartisan support. I think a lot of folks, even frankly conservative Republicans who are leery of spending more, they understand that you can't create a program that helps a third of people who are all in the same boat right? That's just patently unfair on its face. I mean, we have instances of operators who, have a very similar restaurant to one across the street, similar financial position. One of them got the money, one of them didn't. You can guess which one's going to survive and which one isn't. So now's really the time. We do think there's a political opportunity, but to Emily's point, we really need lawmakers to work in a bipartisan fashion. We don't care if it's new money, if it's repurposed money. Either way, the money's there, and we need them to come to an agreement on how to spend it.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for being here. I've got Cordero. I'm probably pronouncing your name wrong. I apologize as someone whose name is frequently mispronounced myself, but you're up if you want to unmute.
No, you pronounced it right. Thank you so much. Cordero McMurray with Chris 6 News here in Corpus Christi. And someone asked my question already, and I think, I think it was said as far as February is the date that we're looking to get these funds. Speaking on behalf of small business owners, as far as the process for applying for these funds, is the process still going to stay the same, or will it be easy? If one business has already applied, can they log back in and, is there just a button that says reapply, or do they have to do the whole process over again?
So I'll jump in. We obviously need to see what the final text of any legislation looks like. We have been assured that everyone who applied before, their information, their applications have been saved. They're still in existence in the government bureaucracy. So we certainly hope and have good reason to believe that folks won't have to go through that whole process again, because it can be quite time consuming. And then, as Emily mentioned earlier, our first priority has got to be getting everyone that's already in line made whole. But we certainly understand that many more restaurants out there need and deserve a helping hand at this point. So we're going to fight to help every single one of them.
Thank you.
Now I'm on mute. Robbie Owen, CBS 11 Dallas. Looks like you left this question in the chat that I can read out loud, or if you want to unmute, you're welcome to say it yourself.
Good morning, everyone. I wasn't sure if we were running out of time. Tiffany Moore is my desk person that RSVP'd. I'm asking, what was the dollar amount of the initial RRF allocation? And I wanted to clarify a figure that I heard earlier, that there was approximately 12,000 Texas restaurants that applied, was expecting the support, and the money was all gone. What percentage of Texas restaurants is that? What percentage just got left out of this?
Kelsey, want me to take it? Yeah, so there's unmet need in dollars by the state, Robbie, and also unmet need by the restaurant recipients. And so it's about 12,055 restaurants. About 34% of Texas restaurants received a grant. So of the eligible applicants, about 18,000 and only 6,000 actually received, leaving that delta of 12,055. The total deficit right now is about $2.8 billion here in Texas, and about $43 billion nationally. So it's definitely not a small sum of money, but here in Texas, that 2.8 billion, right, would save a lot of restaurants and help a lot of our small independents who this was geared towards really make it through, hopefully, this last turn of the pandemic.
So to make sure I'm understanding, about 34% received, so 2/3 applied and never got any funding.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
We've got a few more minutes. I think we've gotten to everyone we've heard from so far, but if any other members of the media have a question, we'd love to hear from you. Just raise your hand or drop us a line in the chat. And I'll kill time by reminding everyone that we've got the link in the chat that any Texan can use to very quickly email their legislators. Billy, I see your hands up. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Looks like you're unmuted, Billy.
In the top right corner of your box, Billy, you'll see a blue box. See if you're able to unmute there. Billy, did you want to type your question in? And also, Kelsey, how can the media that attended today get a copy of the presentation? Okay, good. You got that.
Billy, if you want to chat, if you want to type your question in the chat or in the Q&A. Oh, hi, Billy.
Billy did send it to us via the Q&A. I'm appreciating that everyone's using the various different ways you can throw us questions. Billy's question is, does it look like Congress will replenish the RRF?
I think I'm with Tracy, and I sat on a call this morning with our Washington team, and I wish I could predict it. It's the right thing to do. We know that there's money there, even if they just reallocate funds that have been spent from initial COVID-19 relief, now that we know more and the impact. But it's really going to be this push. And so we need, and I ask all of you, please, as a favor, to please put the link that Kelsey shared in the stories that you run about this. It's going to take Texans coming together to let all of their local officials know that serve in Washington that this matters and they have to get it done. The window is very, very narrow, and this time of year is never the best for restaurants to begin with. And then you couple on top of it the latest variant. This is about a sense of urgency, like maybe it felt like at the beginning of the pandemic when we were trying to get that first round of relief into businesses that were forced to close across the state of Texas. And so I think that's the best guess, but I can tell you this, we're not going to stop until we get this over the line. That it's just too important to our members across the state.
Agreed. And I do, Tiffany, who is really not Tiffany, had a follow-up question. How much was the initial funding? How much was allocated for the RRF? It was
Sure.
28.6 billion is what was initially allocated. That funding was exhausted in a matter of months, and again, only met about 1/3 of the need. So we need about 50 billion just to get through everyone who already applied, is eligible, and is waiting in line. There's also a question, what about the PPP coming back around? I think a key point on the PPP, and Emily might have something to add to this, is it really was meant to be an immediate, very short-term help. It absolutely was that. Many restaurants will tell you it helped them survive those early days of the pandemic, especially. It really was almost solely focused on keeping folks on payroll that otherwise would have been furloughed because we couldn't operate at all. As you recall, that was the time when restaurant dining rooms were ordered by the government to shut down. So the PPP really was kind of an alternative program so that we wouldn't have even more folks on unemployment. So a really important program, but certainly much more short-term in duration than the kind of emergency these restaurants continue to face. That's why we're really focused on the Restaurant Revitalization Fund.
I think, Kelsey, there's a question for Chris, and I think this probably will ask both of you, but I think, Chris, let's say that the right thing happens and you now receive that RRF to really, support that need, right? Based on the losses you've experienced with COVID. What does that mean to you?
So there's a growing list of projects and things that need to get done. So the list of projects grows and the finances aren't. So I think the immediate need would definitely be employee recruiting and retention. So we've already implemented some various forms of that were really unbudgeted expenses. So It's kind of, we figured, well, the money will come later. We'll figure this out later, just pay for it now and we'll figure it out later. So some of those things, for sure, improvements in the restaurant. We need new carpet, we need new tables and chairs, and we need upgrades that have been waiting. So lots of things that need to be done immediately. Even the quote unquote smaller things like local sponsorships and the youth sports and buying the youth posters for, all the little things that we would do without question on a daily basis have just had to wait because of, allocated expenses and just being able to stay alive. So numerous things, first and foremost, taking care of the employees.
Excellent. How about Tracy?
I have a similar story to Chris. I have a lot of projects that need to be done. And so we're waiting, to complete those projects when we feel more sure about what's going on. So, and in some cases I've started at Backstreet. I'm closed right now for a month to replace the floor in the kitchen, and something we just had to do. We didn't have any choice. So we are starting those, and a little scary. But yeah, I mean, you do hold back when you aren't sure what the future holds.
That's right.
I think that's true of anybody in any business. And so I think we're all trying to be fairly careful what we commit to in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So better what's going to happen. Are we going to get another variant? Or are we almost through this or not? So,
yep.
I think we have one more media question I'm aware of. Vince, who shows up as Patrick on our screen, but I understand is Vince.
Yes, hi. Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, Vince Sims, NBC5, Fort Worth, Dallas. I know that you're hoping for the RRF, but if that doesn't happen, in the meantime, what other options are available out there for help?
I think, I'll start, and Kelsey, and I know we'll jump in, but a couple of things, right? So first, I think what is just talks and speaks to the power of the community in Texas is that when the crisis hit, we used our nonprofit foundation that's very much focused on workforce development education, and we're able to raise more than $3 million in grants for independent restaurants. We worked really hard on PPP, on RRF at the federal level, but also in one of the special sessions, we're able to secure $180 million out of the American Rescue Funds that the state of Texas received to build a grant program for restaurant and hospitality. That program is not actually sourcing funds yet. That's something that we're very focused on, is getting that money into the hands of restaurant operators. So for our owners across the state, as soon as we know the parameters of that program, we will certainly communicate, and that will be one other source. But I also would say one of the things that's very important, and Tracy alluded it to, is right now is sharing best practice and working together, whether it be the supply chain, how to save on increasing costs, in some cases 50% over the prior year, labor strategies, how to invest in technology. All of that, really, the Restaurant Association is trying to bring all that newness to these operators right now to help them try to figure out how to do more with less, and really how to sustain their business when at this point there is no additional help, anywhere in the near future, unless we can get this passed. So, Kelsey, I don't know if you want to jump in, but, Tracy said it best. The restaurant operators are not good. These owners are not good. And many have lost everything. And so this type of funding and the state funding that we need to get into the hand of these operators is just so critical right now.
Yeah, Emily hit on a lot of important things. I would just kind of say it's sort of a continuum, right? There's things we've done since the beginning of the pandemic, as Emily mentioned, grants that we raised and distributed to local restaurants through our foundation. We also had an incredibly impactful legislative session at the Texas Capitol, getting things like alcohol to go passed, third-party delivery protections, ensuring all of the PPP loans and RRF grants would not be subject to Texas's franchise tax, so that you essentially wouldn't get a third of that money clawed back. Now we're working with the Workforce Commission on training, on free childcare, on other initiatives to help support our employees. And then long-term, obviously we've got to get this RRF money. We've got to get the state grant program rolled out, as Emily mentioned. We also have to tackle some of our systemic issues, and that's everything from creating common sense pathways to work legally in the US through immigration reform. That's important not just for our restaurants, but every single stage of our food supply chain is at risk if we can't get more employees. Working on other initiatives like childcare, making sure our kids are back in school safely. These are all things that aren't necessarily within restaurants' control, but they're very much tied into our recovery as an economy, especially in a growing state like Texas. All right, I know we're at noon or 12:01, so I'll do a last call for questions. I'll also remind you to please send me an email, kstroifert@txrestaurant.com if you need the recording. We also have some great data points we can share, and we can be available for interviews as needed. And other than that, I'll wrap things up. Just want to say thank you again to Emily, Chris, and Tracy for sharing your stories. Thank you to everyone for tuning in today. For all of our operators who are watching and listening, please know that we have your back, and we're going to do everything we can to support you through this time. So thank you, everyone.